to this computer, and I'm going to start again. So good morning, everyone. Not going well, is it, Sarah?
Take two.
It's Friday the 21st of August 2020. I'm Jaff with a lovely new co-host while Steve is on holiday. So introduce yourself and tell us about yourself. Tell us about yourself.
So I am Sarah Bishop. I am not Steve, obviously, but I do live in Blackpool or just on the Wild Coast as well in England. And I am a deputy head teacher, stroke acting head of a pupil referral unit with students that are 11 to 16. And alongside that, I also do leadership coaching, particularly around dismantling martyrdom and that need for sacrifice and making sure that we get to live whole and rounded lives beyond the job. So I'm super passionate about that. A fellow NLP master practitioner, hypnotherapist, all of that good stuff.
I'm so happy you could join us, Sarah. I'm so happy you could come along. So when Steve told me that he was going on holiday, straight away we were like, Sarah Bishop, we need to get Sarah Bishop on this. We need to, if anyone can replace Steve, or step in for Steve, should I say, because no one can replace Steve, bless him. But if anyone could step in for Steve, it would be Sarah. And already, Sarah, the comments are coming in thick and fast. So you must be popular amongst the folks. You must be really popular. So we've got Tony saying hello.
Hi, Tony.
I don't know if you remember Paul Hollingworth, who's also an NLP master practitioner.
Hi,
so
Paul.
Paul's saying morning all. Kay, who's a current practitioner on the current practitioner program. Good morning, Jaff and Sarah.
Morning,
and
Kay.
Muriel. See, I always get this name wrong, and I feel really bad. So it's Myriel. She did tell me how to pronounce it a few weeks ago, and it just escapes. So how would you say that? Myriel.
Muriel, but I'd have to check with her.
Yeah, please tell us how you say your name. And I'm so sorry. I do remember you telling me last time, and there's some names that I really struggle with.
Name.
That's
so beautiful.
Absolutely. I can't say the last name. It's Morley, and I think that's an even more beautiful name. So Muriel Morley, if we've got that right.
Good morning.
And Shirley Holden. Good morning. So good morning to you all. It is Tools for Living Your Life, episode 5, take 2. And we've already had take 2 twice now. So episode 5 isn't going the way that we'd expected it to have gone. And we're here. So apologies, everyone, for missing last week. It wasn't, bless her, she just replied back, squirrel. So it rhymes with squirrel.
Squirrel, Muriel. I'll practice.
Yeah, we'll practice. We will absolutely practice. Absolutely.
And apologies.
And apologies. Absolutely.
Names are important.
Absolutely, they are. Absolutely, and we've been taught from great people how important names are, because they are a huge part of our lives. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, everyone. We are going to be on for around an hour, perhaps just a little bit more, because you missed out on our delightful faces and voices last week. We hope Steve's having a wonderful holiday. I think he's down in Norfolk or somewhere like that. At some point, he'll be returning back up north, which will be great. And we have a special guest appearance from Mabel. So Mabel, our cute little cuddly friend, she's
Fingers crossed that Mabel is going to play ball, shall we say, today. So we got absolutely soaked in the rain this morning. We've come back, got dried. She's in a little drying coat, and I'm hoping that she's going to kind of settle down and snuggle up but we'll see.
We'll see. This is a joy of doing things live. It's unedited, it's unscripted. We never know what's going to happen. So today, Sarah, we are going to do our usual kind of opener. So you're going to take us through a bit of mindfulness in a minute, and I'll read the story. But just to give people a bit of a kind of, just let people know what's coming up. We're going to be talking about time and timelines, which is quite an important aspect of NLP that we've learned, and how people differentiate time, which I think is when I learned it, it was my light bulb moment. I don't know about anyone else, but it was like, wow, this is incredible stuff. And we do a lot of it on subsequent parts of the NLP program. It was just delightful. So that's what you've got to look forward to, ladies and gents, this morning, an introduction to time and timelines. And for those NLPers who have done it before, join in. Tell us what you think. Please, 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 you've already started commenting away. Continue to comment away, continue to engage, continue to contribute, because that's what this is all about. First of all, though, Sarah, let me hand over to you to take us through our Friday morning routine.
Okay, Jaff. So I'm going to do just a settling routine. So this is just about getting into a kind of settled state. I'm not going to go too deeply on the inside, so you're not taking all of your attention into your inner world. But what I'd invite you to do is just sort of shift you back, get yourself comfortable so that you are sat in a comfortable position for you. If you are sat down, maybe just become aware of the support of the chair underneath the top of your legs where you're sitting. And I'd invite you just to put the soles of your feet, if you can, just onto the floor so that your feet are flat on the floor. And then what we're going to do is just bring a little bit of attention up to the top of your head, sort of to the crown of your head. Just put a little bit of attention there. And then I'm going to invite you just to drop that attention down to just between your eyebrows. Now you can either close your eyes or keep your eyes open, but just go for a soft gaze. And like I said, we're only going lightly on the inside here. Just want you to put your attention to that spot between your eyebrows. We carry some tension there a lot, so I just want you to relax that space between your eyebrows. Just feel any tension that might have been there just melt away. Then going down your face and to your jaw. So again, that jaw, just relax it. Might even want to give it a little wiggle if you're holding it tightly. Just allow your teeth to gently part. Just get rid of that little bit of tension. And then I'm going to invite you just to go in and notice your breath. Just observe it. You're not changing it. There's no judgment. We're not fixing anything, but just go and just pay some attention to your breath. And I'd invite you to notice what you notice. Where are you breathing from? Is you breathing deep? Is it shallow? Just put attention to your breath and notice your inhale and your exhale. And invite you just to take a breath in and a breath out. And the next time we do it, you're going to breathe in, and on the breath out, you can just sigh. So breathe in and breathe out with a sigh. And just allow your attention to settle into your stomach, down your legs, into your knees, down your leg, your lower leg, into your soles of your feet that were on the floor planted. Just feel them rooted down. Safe, secure, and ready to enjoy this session. And in a moment, if you have got your eyes closed, I'm going to invite you to just rub your palms of your hands together. So rub them together, get a bit of warmth, cup them over your eyes so that you've got one hand over each eye, that's it. And then just open your fingers, open your eyes behind your hands, splay your fingers, open your fingers a little bit wider, drag them down your face, letting the light in if you did have your eyes closed. And just bring your attention back to the screen. And back to Jack.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. Thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. It's just a nice way of just, I think sometimes, especially if we're coming to something and we would just want to kind of almost have a bit of a pause and a break, one of the quickest, easiest ways to do it is just bring our attention to our breath and our body. With no judgment, we're not trying to change anything, fix anything, just putting our awareness there. And then it kind of allows us just to get into a bit of a settled state.
And settled state indeed, because it is story time. So although Steve is away, what we wanted to do was to keep this as regular a format as we've had for the last few weeks. So thank you so much for that setup, Sarah. And we'll move on to story time. So again, you can keep your eyes open or you can close your eyes and just get into a place that's right for you, a nice relaxed place that's right for you to listen to the life savings. There was once a woman who decided to save parts of her life till later, when she might have more need of them. She had the idea when she was quite young, and her parents encouraged her. The first part of her life she ever saved was half an hour from when she was 4. Later, she saved a day when she was 5, another day from when she was 5.5, 6 days from when she was 6, and so on all the way through her life until she was 70. Well, she put all these life savings in a safe in her parents' office. They had a fortune-telling business with a little magic on the side. Each one had its own special box with a label, giving the duration. That means how long it was and her age. Eventually, as I said, the woman got to be 70 and decided to spend some of her savings. First, she opened the box with a day from when she was 8. Her heart began to pound the moment she opened the box. She lost all interest in the office and the fortune-telling business and rushed out to the park. Here, she played on the swings and rolled on the grass and fished in the pond and ate ice cream. By the end of the day, she was worn out, but her cheeks were rosy and her eyes shone. The next morning, after breakfast, the woman opened the box with a week in it from when she was 10. After that, a great deal happened. And a great deal didn't happen. Dusting didn't happen, for instance, or washing up, or making an appointment at the hairdresser's. Not many bills were paid or weeds dug up. At the end of the week, the woman needed another week to sort herself out. All the same, her step was light as she walked about the town, and her friends said she was a changed woman. Well, so it continued for some years, the woman spending her savings bit by bit. Not all her experiences were happy, of course. Life is not like that. The 2 days from when she was 14, for instance, were dreadful. She felt terribly shy all the time and was desperately worried about an almost invisible spot on her chin. Then, finally, when she had used up all her life savings, the woman took to her bed, read a book for a while, and presently died. Some days later, when friends were clearing out the office, one box of the woman's savings were discovered unopened. It was tucked away under a pile of old letters in the safe. The woman herself must not have noticed it. Its label, in her father's hand, said, half an hour, age 4. Well, as soon as the box was open, odd things began to happen. One of the friends went racing up and down the stairs. The office was on the 3rd floor. Another made a den under the desk, and a third played with the phone. Of course, as you will realize, it was the last half hour of the woman's life that was causing this. Now that the woman herself was dead, it had nowhere else to go. And, apparently, no reason to come to an end. In fact, as far as I know, it's still around. Somewhere. So there we are. If ever you feel the urge to act like a 4-year-old, unless you are a 4-year-old, you can blame it on the life savings of the woman in the fortune-telling business with a little magic on the side. That's what I do. That wonderful story, Life Savings, is from a book called The Night Train by Alan Alberg. So Alan Alberg, The Night Train and Life Savings.
What a lovely, lovely story.
I love it, and I love all of these stories, and we hope that you're all enjoying listening to these fantastic stories that we're being able to read to you every single week, because I just think they've got such meaning to them, such meaning to them, and it brings us nicely onto our topic of time and timelines. And me and Sarah love having this conversation. Well, I know I love having this conversation with Sarah because I think we have such interesting stories to always tell each other. And now we're going to share those stories with the rest of the world and whoever else is listening in. Um, so there's two preferences, Sarah, and please chip in at any point because I think it's important that we start with. Let's just start with the methodology, the process to begin with. And again, we've talked in previous sessions that NLP was based on modeling, the difference that makes a difference. And, the founders of NLP modeled a load of stuff. And some of that stuff was around how people view time. And I don't know about you, Sarah, but I growing up, I was always fascinated by this. So I always wondered why I was sometimes early to things, what I considered early, and sometimes people would be late to things, or what I consider to be late. There's this kind of notion in the South Asian culture of Asian timing, which means you be incredibly late to absolutely everything, which I just found, or again late to everything, which I found incredibly interesting. But there is this concept that actually people have one of two preferences, and so there's a through time. And if you're a through timer, or if you have a preference for through time, well, actually, you can see a bit of the past, you can see a bit of the present, and you can see a bit of the future. Incredibly interesting. It's absolutely delightful for someone like myself at times to be able to look back fondly at the past, and at other times it's not so great to be able to have that bit of the past still there, still kind of lingering, and still me being able to kind of feel it or kind of sense it or have that recollection. Likewise, it's great to sometimes wander into the future and go, ooh, the future is going to be great. And it can also scare the bejeebers out of me sometimes, thinking, my gosh, what if that future does come to pass, what would that be like?
Yeah.
So that's one timeline preference, which is through time. So you can see a bit of the past, a bit of the present, because you're in the present, and a bit of the future. And so I'm doing this kind of with my hands, because actually when we learned it was drawn this way on the flip chart. So I think it's just helpful to give people a perspective. So it's kind of, you've got that line. And then you've got in time. And an in timer, Sarah, if and please jump in here because this is your preference from what I know of you. An in timer is someone who very much lives in the present. Is deeply rooted in the present. Is absolutely enjoying the present. And please at this point jump in. From what I know, associating into the past or thinking about the future is a little bit more difficult or non-existent at times.
Yeah, depending on how strongly you're doing that preference. And I think your hand movement was naturally kind of explaining the through time where you've almost can see in front of you your past and your future. I think for a preference, and again, we talk about this as preferences. These aren't hard and fast things. These are just kind of preferences, tendencies, ways that we filter and make sense and process the world around us. And time is part of that, isn't it? So I think, for those of us that do it differently and do in time, it tends to be more, as you say, that the present moment is here and we're in it. And there's a sense of the past some way back there and a sense that the future's some way up there. But it's all a little bit wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, as Doctor Who would say. We're more sort of aware of the present. And as you say, these are preferences and there are uses and benefits and things for both. But we tend to naturally drop into one of those two preferences.
And the reason why I found this whole conversation really interesting, Sarah, is because actually in this current situation, COVID has meant that I was saying just before this session, from March onwards, I can't remember much of the past.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly unfamiliar for me. Incredibly unfamiliar. So I can remember, if you remember, I was in the beautiful Oswald towards the start of this year. So I was lucky enough to be in Australia. I remember all of that. Yeah. I remember all of February, or near as much all of February. From March onwards, I can't recall pretty much anything. And the conversation was actually, even though we have these preferences, the current situation has meant that even for through timers, for those people who have a through time preference, we have had to become, or we've had to flex our timeline preference so that we become much more in time, because the past is all kind of merging into one since we've been in this situation, and the future is incredibly unknown at the minute. And so to plan for anything in the future, because one of the things that's a through timer is really good at, or someone with someone with a through time preference is really good at, is planning for the future. That's one of the qualities. Well, in this situation, planning for the future is quite difficult because we don't know what that future will look like.
I think you're right. I think there's so many unknowns that your usual preference for mapping out what's coming up has changed because of the context that we're in. Whereas for someone who naturally is in time, that's probably more familiar.
Yeah.
In a sense, anyway.
Yeah.
And I think, as you say, because of things like lockdown and such a lot changed in such a short space of time, I also think with that memory stuff that feels unfamiliar is we lots of us, to some level, without perhaps realizing it, our systems went into fight or flight when this happened. And one of the things we know about fight or flight is it diverts our attention to our extremities, to things that we need to survive or fight or flight in the moment, and some of that comes away from our thinking brain. So our thinking brain kind of goes offline. I think for some of us there probably was a point where our thinking brain almost went offline for a short period of time, which is interesting. That I think for lots of us, I had a similar conversation with colleagues when I was back in work yesterday, that there's almost periods of time that have either no memory or our sense of time has gone completely. And as you say, for my colleagues that I know do through time, that's more unfamiliar to them.
Incredibly. You know, I absolutely resonate with that. Absolutely resonate with the fact that there are moments where I just think, where's that part of the week or the month disappear to? I really, and it's interesting because what I've had to do, I've always been quite, and again, it's one of the qualities, if you will, of someone who has quite a strong through time preference, is to plan. So I've always had I've always used my diary quite stringently over the years. I've realized during lockdown I've used it much more. So to the point where, minutes are being planned. And I think that's, it's interesting. Tony's written here, in time was essential for me to survive lockdown. I think in some ways it was a survival mechanism for me to remember what has happened, because there were large swathes of weeks and months that I was going, I don't necessarily remember what was going on there. And it can feel really unfamiliar, when you've got quite a strong, when you've got one of these preferences quite strongly. So I've shared with you a couple of stories, but before we go into stories, I think, did you want to say something there, Sarah?
Well, yeah, and just I think, as Tony said, and as you said there, and one of the things that I love when we're applying some of the NLP that we've done, is one of the foundations for me of that is this notion that we can become more flexible. Like that's the idea. So we can have a preference, but it doesn't mean that we're stuck with that. Once we've got a little bit of awareness, and we'll always, I think, go to our default preference, but having that flexibility, like I say, there's something really useful, I think, about lockdown and about this situation of being able to be in time and in the moment. There's a lot of, I think, benefits to that for this period of time. But equally, I'm aware, I mean, I've said I'm on my summer break from my day job as the leader in education, and we're just coming back to it now. So I'm starting to look at emails again, starting to go back into work, and I have to make a real conscious effort with work stuff. And I still ask for help, and I get support from people who naturally do through time, but I have to make a real effort with work stuff to do a bit more through time, a bit more planning. And I'm really noticing that over the last couple of days, which is unfamiliar for me, to have to go back to that model of thinking, I need to do a bit of through time here. But that flexibility, being able to sometimes do in time, Because I think there's something as well, isn't there, about when we're at leisure.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
to be in time because you want to be fully
Absolutely.
enjoying that moment.
Absolutely.
And there are times that I've learned the hard way sometimes that you need to do a bit of free time in life sometimes.
Well, before we go on to that, I think, well, actually, let's tell us why. So, you told me this just before we came online, and I don't think I've heard lots of stories from you, Sarah, but this one I don't think I've ever heard before.
I have
And
lots of time stories. As someone with a very strong in-time preference. But we were chatting, I was saying one of the things that I've learned is that there are some situations, work is one of them, I have to be able to do free time. The other place that's really important for us in time is to change our preference is airports and flights. I say that from experience. I have had experiences at airports, shall we say, several times in my life. The first was my background is judo, as you know, Jaff, and I did judo for Great Britain as a junior and a senior, which was a huge part of my life for a long time. But when I was I think I must have been 19 or 20, I was selected for the first time to do a competition in Japan. So it was a training set up for a couple of weeks and then a competition in Japan. And it was huge. It was like a massive, massive milestone for me. I was so excited. And so I set off on the train. It's at Heathrow, the team were meeting up. My first time of being selected to go to Japan for something that big. And so I set off with my kit on the train from Blackpool North down to Heathrow, got to Heathrow. Now, I'm of an older generation, so back when I was 20, we did not have mobile phones. So I get to the airport. I've never met anybody at an airport before the team. It was my first big international, not travelling on a coach. Couldn't find the team. Now, as well as doing time stuff, I can do a bit of spatial sort of self-management can sometimes be a struggle. I've got better over time, but certainly my 20-year-old self found the self-management a little bit of a struggle. So I was panicking in Heathrow Airport because I couldn't find the team, thinking, am I in the wrong place? Where are we meant to meet? So I found a payphone, because we're back in the day, and rang home and spoke to my dad in a bit of a tear, saying, I don't know where the team are, I don't know where the team are. So my dad rang the house of the team manager and was somewhat surprised that the team manager answered, because the team manager was in Manchester. And I think my dad's question to him was, hi Richard, I'm wondering why you're in Manchester and my daughter's at Heathrow. And I'd got the days confused. I'd gone a whole 24 hours early. So I was at Heathrow, but of course none of the rest of the team were there because the rest of the team were
at home.
were at home getting ready. So I had a little bit of an adventure in London as a very kind person at the desk helped me out. See, this is the bonus. When you're doing time, you have bonus adventures and you find the kindness of strangers.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the guy at the airport sort of was helping me find where to stay overnight because now I had a problem with where I was going to stay. Told me about the hotel airport and I was like, oh my gosh, that'd take all my spends. Like, I can't do that. I've got no money. I'm a 20-year-old student on an international judo trip. I've not got money. So I had a little adventure around London to go into a little YMCA and stayed there that he helped me find. And the other time at the airport was when I was living in France for a year and I came back. I had no money at the airport. I'd run out of money. This was the theme of my early life, by the way. And in the airport so I'd got the connection from Toulouse to Paris, and then I was getting from Paris to Manchester. Toulouse to Paris, no problem. Paris airport, I had a wait of about an hour. I had no money, but I do like to window shop. So off I potter around the airport looking at all these lovely things, and I missed my flight. So I got a message to Manchester to say, Mr. and Mrs. Bishop, the flight's been delayed. So they think something's happened on the connection from Toulouse to Paris. And of course I tip up several hours later, just window shopping. Missed the flight. So airports are not the place to do in time, was the learning point.
And for me, when we chuckle and we laugh. When they're really strong, though, they are really, really
Yeah.
strong. And you know, one of the reasons for setting this podcast up, or on this Facebook group in particular, because we're well aware of the fact that there are non-NLPs who might be interested to know about how does NLP kind of manifest itself ethically and ecologically, because as we know, there's unfortunately a lot of unethical and ecological NLP out there, and these stories are real life, and this is the beauty of it, because again, once you know it, you become much more aware of it. And for me, this whole time stuff saved my friendship with my friend at the time. And when we went to the foundation diploma, and I remember it like it was yesterday. We really good friends, but would argue consistently and constantly about time. So we're meeting at 12 o'clock. In my head, and this was before I knew NLP, in my head, you are polite and you are considerate by turning up 10 minutes early, sometimes even 15 minutes early, because that is being polite and considerate. And so for me, it'd be kind of, I'd get outside his house and I'd text him and I'd say, I'm here. And kind of it'd get to 5:02, and I could see him, I could tell I was getting a little bit riled up. Again, like you, my state management perhaps back then wasn't as great as it is now. So I'd get myself a little bit riled up. It'd get to 11 o'clock and I'd be really riled up by this point. Get 2 minutes past 11 and I'm really, really, really angry by this point. And he saunters out at 10 past 11. By which
I
point
get it.
I'm absolutely by which point I am absolutely fuming, right? And he'd get in the car, and this was a consistent pattern of ours, a consistent pattern of our friendship. What time do you call this? 10 past 12, he'd say, which he answered the question rightly, but there was me thinking, you're being an absolutely cheeky git now, and I don't appreciate you being cheeky as well. But for him, there was nothing cheeky about it. It was like, it's 10 past 12. So we'd go and we'd sit in an awkward silence for about 20 minutes as I'm driving and I'm slamming things around me, obviously making sure I've got two wheels on the, but you know, if I'm pushing the window down, I'd be doing it, and if I'm doing my indicators, I'd be doing it with some force, and you know, just to let him know that I'm angry, just so that he could tell that I was right. And he was probably sat there going, I have no idea why this guy's really angry. At times he would get really angry because he'd go, well, we agreed 12 o'clock. It's not my bloody fault you turned up at 10 to 12.
Resonates.
And I would go, how bloody dare you? And apologies for my language, guys, but I'd say, how dare you? That is me being polite. That is me being polite, right? Once the awkward 20 minutes had finished, Sarah, I'd sit there and go, right, I don't get it. Just explain to me what happens. Because we agreed 12 o'clock. Okay, I get that I've come early. I think I'm being really polite, by the way. I don't get why you have to come out at 10 past. And he would often say something like, well, I'm just about to leave the house and my mum calls me over and she says, could I have a quick chat with you? And I'm thinking, well, it's my mum and I'm not going to say no to my mum. And then I remember that the cat hasn't got any food left, and actually we might be out all day and into the early hours of the morning, so I need to leave some food out for the cat. And then I remembered I haven't got my wallet, and so I need to quickly go grab my wallet because I don't want you paying for everything. And before you know it, it's 10 past. And at this point, I'm even more angry at Sarah, thinking, that shows you're really unprepared. That shows you are completely unprepared. And as human beings, we can put strange meaning to stuff.
Absolutely.
So you being unprepared means you don't care about our friendship.
Yeah. And actually, you're right. And I think this is the thing about the benefits of knowing this stuff, is you can be a bit more flexible in how you see other people's actions. Because
absolutely,
if we go back to that premise at the start, that actually this is just a preference for how we process the outside world. Like, it's like we're operating on different systems.
Yeah.
So I always think of the time preferences. It's like, maybe you're Windows and I'm Mac.
Yeah.
We're not
absolutely
wrong, but we're just operating on different systems here.
Yeah.
And actually, it can be the meaning that we attach to that.
Absolutely.
That's coming from us, you know, that actually needs a little bit of questioning. And you're right.
And sorry, Sarah, I was going to say, and what for me, what was really interesting was when we then learnt about the time stuff on the module, and you know, we've talked about Chris, our trainer, in previous sessions, but when Chris talked about these pop-ups, so in timers have these pop-ups that just before you're about to do something, you'll go, ooh, the cat needs feeding, and everything else no longer exists. Everything else is no longer in your view. Ooh, I forgot my wallet, so let me quickly go get my... And when he explained that, Sarah, my gosh, we just looked
Yeah.
at each other and we smiled and we laughed and we said to Chris, we think you just saved a friendship here. Because it was getting to that point, I remember on that Sunday morning, so it's on day 4 of the foundation diploma, on that Sunday morning, it happened again. So I said, I'll be there for 9. I was there for 8:45. He sauntered out at 9:10. And we just thought, after this, let's leave it. Let's not chat ever again. Or let's take a break at least, because this is really affecting our friendship. You know, we're starting, each time we meet, we're spending 45 minutes just really frustrated, and you could sense that anger and that non-verbal communication that was coming out, that awkward silence. And just learning about that saved our friendship hugely. And you just think, wow, this is just incredible stuff, you know. But when he was telling me about his cat and his wallet and all that kind of stuff, I thought, he's telling me a load of lies here. And then I hear it from Chris and these pop-ups, and I'm guessing you must have something similar happen.
Hugely, and as you say, I think, you know, we talked about it's just a different operating system, and that's how we tend to do. You know, we're as different on the inside as we are on the outside, and that understanding that can save friendships, and I think understanding it can help you, like I say, have that flexibility of time. So I know I'll do pop-ups. So in the morning, I know now the time that I must leave in order to be on time at work, because in the workplace, I have to be on time. I have to be on time. You know, it's not really an option to just operate in an in time and just do that. So I now know I will still have the pop-ups. So I'll look out at the sky and think, could be a good drying day. Get that washing out. But now I know that's a trick. That pop-up's a trick. Time will, you know, I don't have the time that I think I've got. So I will leave it. I'll see the pop-up and I'll press close rather than acting on the pop-up in those situations. So I think, you know, there's probably people listening that maybe haven't done NLP that will resonate more with one of us than the other.
Absolutely.
In terms of how we do it. And it is then just, once you know stuff, it's what you do with it. And as you say, just having that flexibility to do it differently. And also, I think there's something about the benefits of the preferences we have for time. So you mentioned some about like the way you do time, you find it easier to plan for the future. One of the things I think within timers that we can tend to do is, because we're operating in the present and the past has kind of happened, it's behind us, it's not in our vision, if you like, we can forget the stuff in the past, which can be useful if you're wanting to forget a grudge. Absolutely. We don't tend to hold grudges so much because it's kind of happened, it's in the past, which can be a really positive thing to do. So it's useful to know that and flip between the two. The flip side of it is, I think, and certainly this is what I've learned and applied to my leadership in terms of how I do time differently now, is we can forget the learning. So we can do stuff that maybe we could take the learning from, and we can leave the learning behind. And I think one of the things that I've learned to do, certainly as an in-timer, is where stuff's happened, it's good not to hold a grudge, but it's also good to take some learning from a situation and not just not have it happen again because you forgot about it. It happened back then. Does that make some sense? I don't know if I explained
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely, and I think for me, on the flip side, as a through timer, so we talked about before that the preference ideally is through time for work, in time for leisure.
Yes.
So me and Dee went to go watch a couple of years ago Downton Abbey. What a wonder! And you know, we were sat in these wonderful armchairs. It was a beautiful cinema, absolutely beautiful cinema. But I remember halfway through that, Sarah, watching it, you know, and we had the wonderful Dame Maggie Smith on, and fantastic. You know, it really should have, and it did. It captivated me. And there was a split moment where I'd gone, my gosh, that meeting last week, I could have handled that a little bit differently. And I should have said this and I should have said that. And oof, I've got all that admin to do next week. And so I was gone.
Yeah.
I was no longer in Preston Cinema watching the wonderful Dame Maggie Smith.
Yeah.
I was somewhere else.
Yeah.
I was somewhere completely differently. And I had to
Yeah.
pull myself, and like you said, once you got it, and this is what I love about the NLP, once you got that self-awareness, you can snap yourself straight back out again and go, right, I am here with a friend watching a wonderful movie in some incredibly wonderful kind of seats and whatnot. Let me focus on what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I need to be fully present in this moment, enjoy myself.
That's
And
it.
that can wait, and that can wait, and I just need to.
Yeah.
And it's ever so interesting, isn't it? Because again, if you have a really strong through time preference, because you can typically see it, a little bit of everything, it's incredibly so I when I finish my day's work, I jump straight into bed behind me, and I've put on the TV, and there will be moments throughout that evening where I'll go into, so I'll have to press pause and I'll start doing some admin for what's coming up, or I'll reflect on, and it's incredibly insightful when you catch yourself in that spot, because you're going, wait a minute, that's
This is
done
leisure
now.
time.
This is leisure time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so important to have that distinction and to build that in to your day, to go, right, I will be through time for work, and I'll be in time for play.
Yeah. Which is the most useful, because as you said, I mean, we loved that movie and we sat watching it. I was fully immersed. I mean, I was in the ballroom.
Yeah.
I was there. You know, for the whole thing. And that for me is really, really easy. But, you know, there are other areas, other arenas in my life that I have to work a little bit harder to kind of think, well, hang on, I need to do it. I need to do my time stuff differently. I need to process time differently, because time is just time, isn't it? It's a man-made concept. You know, it's which is interesting. I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole to go down, isn't it? says the Doctor Who fan.
We've had some wonderful comments. So Joe, welcome Joe. So Joe O'Callaghan said, one is never afraid of the unknown. One is afraid of the known coming to an end. And that was from Jiddu Krishnamurti. So so Jiddu Krishnamurti. One is never afraid of the unknown. One is afraid of the known coming to an end. Tony said it's a big flashpoint, so I'm guessing that's about time. So many friends wondering so much later than me. Yes, Sarah, flexibility. Morning, Callahan, welcome. And then finally we've got a comment here. I have to fool myself by scheduling half an hour early to allow for pop-ups.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? When we know how we do stuff, we can take steps that work for us to kind of manage that in the best way. Yeah, absolutely. Totally resonate with that.
And for me,
pop-ups are going to pop up.
I just find this whole conversation fascinating, and I would love to at some point, you know, either be inside someone who does in time really strongly, or kind of just see that, because for me that is such an interesting kind of notion, and I love this notion of pop-ups. I love it. I just think it's wonderful, and for me it would be so insightful to see how that manifests itself, and how that comes about, and that will probably never happen. I'm aware of that, and at the same time it's something that I'm always so curious to go, I just wonder
how you do that,
how you do that. And
that's kind of modeling, isn't it? I guess, like, how would I have to do it like you? You know, what would I have to do? And
like I said, that there's certain situations that you fall into it. So you remember very well that I spent a year in London, and as a well, just short of a year in London, and as someone who had a very strong through time preference, my gosh, living in a place like London absolutely snapped me out of that. Absolutely snapped me out of that, because you're in London. And actually the tubes will work when the tubes want to work, and people will move as fast or as slow as people want to move as they want to move. And I remember the first 2-3 weeks there really kind of challenged my flexibility, as Tony put it, and as you said it before, Sarah, challenged my flexibility.
Yeah.
But I was so grateful for that experience, so grateful for that experience, because it allowed me to go, I can do it.
That's the thing, you know, and we that flexibility is very much about remembering that it's preference, that it's not fixed. You know, I think we as humans, we naturally put labels on ourselves, and it's like, oh, I'm an in timer, an identity. Well, actually, no, I'm not. I do in time more often because it's a preference. It's not who I am. It's not an identity level.
It's not an identity, absolutely.
And it's interesting as well, because one of the things with these, you know, these preferences is it's how we process the world, but it's also what we pay attention to, like what we filter. And I remember, I mean, I love Harry Potter. I'm a Harry Potter fan. I love the series. And in one of our sessions with training, Chris asked me the question about where does time appear in the Harry Potter, like where does it feature? And it completely threw me, like, what? Time, Harry Potter? What? There's no time mentioned in Harry Potter. And yeah, what's interesting is because they've reset that filter now, because I listen to the audio that Stephen Fry does on Harry Potter a lot. And now every time time is mentioned, and it's mentioned quite a lot, I'm like, it does mention time, because it reset my filters. But it's one of the things that we kind of, it's how we pay attention to the world as well, isn't it? And what we filter in and out. And for me, time, I don't tend to filter it in. It's like,
and it's I think we've had so many insightful conversations over the years about time and preferences. And again, it's like I said, it's a preference, and it's a set of, it's what we call a meta program. So in some ways it's and I love the way that Steve kind of described the P of NLP, the programming bit, which is the habits. The habits of ours that we've either taken on unconsciously, or that they've all kind of become unconscious patterns of behavior, and that sometimes you might want to do a bit of an upgrade on them. And that is absolutely fine to do a bit of an upgrade on them, to go, actually, this habit isn't suiting me at the minute, or I need to do something different about this habit. But it's part of that whole notion of programming, and this is just one of the programs that, you know, you mentioned the lovely presupposition of we're as different on the inside as we're different on the outside.
Absolutely. And sorry, I was going to say, there's no one that's right. There's no one that's better than another. It's about, in this moment, is it working for me? Is it serving me well? And if it is, brilliant, grand, crack on. You know, why change it? If it's not, if it's getting in your way, it's tripping you up. So the thing with time with me, one of the things that I found on my leadership journey is that it was tripping me up. It was getting me into bother, because I needed to pay some attention to how I was doing time at work. And once I got that, and I did something around it, and I also know now I'm good at spotting who does through time in my team. So if I need to be organised for something specific, then I'm quite happy to ask for them to help with that. So for instance, when we had Ofsted it's pretty important that I know what meetings are happening when.
I think that would be a pretty good idea, Sarah.
It's helpful. And also, and then again, going back to that thing of, there's a little bit of stress involved in that. So I also know that, you know, there's a bit of stress that'll make it a little bit harder for me. So one of the things I did was sat down with someone who does through time in my team, and made sure that they were on board with helping me stay organised in that day. Great. You know, that worked.
And we haven't got time now, because we're already at 11:20. By all means, we'll kind of continue for another 5 or 10 minutes past the half hour, but comments are continuing to come in. Before I come on to the comments, one of the things is that a lot of these meta programs lend themselves to other meta programs. And one of the things that we're going to talk about, and we'll briefly mention it now and then hopefully pick it up at some other point, is this concept of towards and away from, which I really struggle with. So time is something that I can absolutely, hands down, explain to someone, and I wish I had a flip chart now and drew it out and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, I think I did it relatively well using my hands and whatnot. Towards and away from is something that I really struggle with. So before I ask you to just give us an overview of your understanding of towards and away from, Sarah, we've got a couple of other comments. So Muriel, again, for me, flow is important, going with it, watching the flirts and gifts of the unknown. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And see, that's something that as a through timer I struggle with. As someone who's got a very strong through time preference, let me rephrase that. I really struggle with that. Because it's like, well, it's not part of the plan. And so therefore you can't, if it's not part of that plan, you can't go with the why would you go with the flow? And we've had some wonderful conversations about this, about, actually what does it mean to just go with it? Just
Yeah.
just go with it and see what happens. And
Loosen
with
that
someone
grip of
who's
control.
absolutely, and with someone who's got quite a strong through time preference, again, that can be quite unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
only when you spot yourself going, that's quite unfamiliar, can you start to loosen that grip and start to go,
Yeah.
actually, yeah, let's see what happens when I do go with the flow, and let's see what happens when,
Yeah.
when I when I kind of watch the flirts and gifts of the unknown.
Yeah.
What happens? Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And as we said, it's horses for courses and what works in the moment. And in the moment that we're in these times, an ability to go with the flow
yeah,
is hugely
is
helpful.
huge, massively. And Paul also wrote, I found beliefs have also helped. So yeah,
Yeah.
and again, timeline preferences are very much linked to beliefs.
Yeah.
So the two for me are kind of interchangeable at times.
They are, and it's as we said, if we look at this as one of the ways that we filter in the world, beliefs is another filter, isn't it? So in some respects, we're looking at how we filter and how we sample what's going on around us, and beliefs and preferences for timelines all fit into that.
Yeah, it seems as though we've got a lot of in-time preference people tuning in today, Sarah, because Jacqueline's just going, go with the flow, be in the moment to moment. And I'm thinking, again, quite a, that for me, I sense that as quite an in-time preference for Jacqueline
Yeah.
there. I might have got that completely wrong, and if I have, I apologize. But there is something about, like we've said time and time again, none of these are right, none of these are wrong. They are states that actually you can step into, and I think that's really important as well. You can
Yeah.
step into these states. You can have the flexibility to kind of have one more of the time and less others of the time. And for me, it's around, you do one, and again, I'm using my hands quite clearly. You do one when you're at work and planning and day jobs and anything that
Yeah.
requires you to kind of, to be able to sample all three at once. And the other when actually you just need to enjoy yourself. And on one last story, I remember the time where I got this absolutely right, Sarah, absolutely right. Last year we went on holiday with my family, and Sarah knows a lot about my family, so hopefully she'll be proud that I went on this holiday. Absolutely in time. Absolutely. It was an incredible 7 days. There were 9 of us who went to Morocco, and I spent the entire 9 days completely in time. I thought if
Fantastic.
Sarah was here right now, she'd be going, "You've done it, Jaffer.
Yeah.
You can have your
Fantastic.
gold star now."
Yeah.
And it was great. It was exactly what Jacqueline, said there. Go with the flow.
Yeah.
Go, and it was fabulous. It was fabulous. It was great. It really, really was great. We're coming on to 25 past. So let's have this overview, please, Sarah, of towards and away from. And I'm more than happy if you are to stay on for an extra few minutes with the gang. It
Yeah.
seems as though we're getting quite a lot of engagement today, which is fabulous.
Yeah, happy to be flexible on that. Got little Mabel making an appearance. Just get rid of this pop-up. By the way, if you want help, doing in time, I would say four-legged friends, fully in the moment all of the time. She really teaches me to be fully present, fully mindful, fully enjoying whatever's going on. Yeah, towards and away from it. It's another metaphor we should say. So it's kind of one of these operating systems that is perhaps running in the background for us that we might not be aware of. And for me, it's particularly around motivation, how we do motivation. So some of us naturally, again, it's just a preference, it's not fixed. Some of us tend to have a preference where we are motivated more by thinking of moving towards a goal. So there's an outcome that we want, something that we want to happen. That's more likely to motivate us. For some of us, we tend to be more motivated by moving away from what we don't want. And we can do a mixture of the two. We can do different ones for different situations as well. So on the whole, I tend to have a preference for towards. Again, I talked about my sports background earlier on, very used to throughout my life having a goal and working towards that, and that being the motivation. When it comes to things like mental health and health, I do a bit more away from. I'm more motivated about doing the things to keep myself well because I want to stay away from not being well, if that makes sense. So it's how we do motivation. And the reason it's important, it's like anything, I think, is self-awareness helps, because once you know how you do stuff, you've got choice. That's my big thing. You know, that it's not right or wrong, it's about choice. So if I know how I'm doing something, I've got a bit of choice around that. I think from my education background, I find it interesting because I think a lot of what we naturally tend to do with people, when I'm thinking of young people, is we do towards a lot. So we've just had exam results day, and a lot of the motivation tends to be around, if you do this, then you'll get that grade that you want. If you do this, then you'll get into college on the course that you want. And those are examples of towards goals, if you like. But if you've got a kid sat in front of you who isn't particularly towards motivated but does a lot of away from, then you need to be talking to them in terms of what it is they want to avoid. So they're the kids that I'd be more likely to be talking about. You don't want to be sitting having to do extra English when your mates are having a coffee in the thingy because they're on free, but you've got to do a catch up. Does that make some sense?
Absolutely.
It can be useful in just thinking about things from that perspective.
And I know I'm well, surely, Sarah, surely we would have worked out by now.
That was a rhetorical question out there. It was, Jaff, oh my goodness. I sense occasionally you do towards.
Occasionally, it's fleeting. It was so interesting though. So me and Sarah last year we did our train the trainers with Chris. Let me get it right. NLP for training program, and I'm looking up there because I've hung my certificate with pride on my wall, Sarah. NLP for training program, and we had to write a leaflet. So we had to write a leaflet, and we had to write a leaflet that scattered towards and away from. So you know, if you were going to develop a brand new training course incorporating elements of NLP and other stuff that you might be aware of, you know, and you're writing some marketing stuff, do it, you know, and again, it's beautiful when you know it. Actually, what you need to do is litter your literature with a bit of towards and a bit of away from, so that you've got the whole demographic. You know, you've got everyone. And I found it incredibly challenging. And I remember Chris at the time, our trainer, saying he didn't. So I've spent the last 5 years being really, really engaged and involved and immersed in NLP, and he said he couldn't really remember a time where I did an away from pattern.
Yeah.
And I hadn't noticed that, and it was, I couldn't. It's not, again, it's that filtering thing. It just doesn't even register in my filters. It just does not come through in my filters, or if it does, I don't pick up on it.
Yeah.
Because it will come through in my filters. It's pushed to a side, and anything that's very much towards, it's kind of what I fancy.
Yeah, and that's where you put your attention, and that's the interesting thing. And I know we talked about ecology and ethics at the start of this, and this is where I think, you know, we were fortunate to be trained in a very ethical way.
Absolutely.
It's really important that this isn't about manipulation. It's about flexibility of how we do stuff ourselves, but also how we can engage with people who maybe do it differently.
Yeah.
So the example I gave of young people, you know, that's about being able to step into their model of the world, how they process stuff, so that what we're saying makes some sense. Does that make sense, rather than a manipulation model? It's about, as you say, being able to reach a wider group of people.
Because, you know, we're like you said, we've all got very different preferences. And actually, if you've got, as we've got, a wonderful set of tools that you want to support people with, then of course some people will be motivated towards getting those tools.
Yeah.
And other people, and again, this is where my uncertainty of away from comes in. So again, correct me, Sarah, at any point. But, you know, there will be some people who will go, well, I need something to keep me away from whatever it is. I need a set of tools to keep me away from
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And some people will go, I need a set of tools to make sure that I get whatever it is that I know that I want to absolutely aim for.
Absolutely.
And like I said, it's for us, it's not about absolutely wholeheartedly. It's about doing it ethically, doing it ecologically, because it's too good not to do it otherwise. You know, it's the way it's meant to be done. We're working with people, and we want to support
Yes.
people to get a better understanding of themselves. And hopefully, this hour alone, this hour and a half alone, has kind of given people some understanding of their timeline preferences. So, Muriel, again, away from exclamation mark. So
Yeah.
it would be absolutely, for me, it would be fascinating to have a conversation with Muriel, because it is that difference that makes a difference. It's actually, I'm always intrigued as to how people
Yeah.
do very strong away from as a preference.
And if you know that, you can then select the things that are going to work best for
Mm,
you. So, for example, if you do more, if you tend to do more away from in your processing and thinking, and that's what motivates you, then you can sit and do all the positive affirmations in the world in the morning. It might not be the right
yeah.
best fit. Does that make sense?
Mm,
So, and again, I think that notion that we can do different meta programs, we can have different preferences for different spheres of our life. So I know, whereas I tend to do a fair bit of towards, I'll also do a bit of away
mm,
from on things like health, certainly mental health and things like that. I'll actively take measures and do resiliency work. For me, it tends to be more because I don't want to become stressed and I don't want to get burnout, rather than a towards goal. Does that make some sense? So yeah, interesting stuff.
and Tony's written here, love the towards away from combo. And we will be exploring other meta programs over the next few weeks, in
Yeah.
particular when Steve's back, and also when Sarah continues to join me or Steve, depending on what's going on. Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a delight. It has been absolutely delightful to have you with me this morning.
Thank you for inviting. I'm so thrilled that you asked me to hop on and have a chat with you, Jeff. So thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed it as always.
And thank you ever so much to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate your time, your efforts, your energies, just being with us. I think it's really lovely to have like-minded folk join us on this journey. Unfortunately, I won't be here next week and Steve won't be here next week. So next week will be a complete miss. However, please tune in. And you never know, Sarah, we may absolutely, what was I going to say? This may become a three-way show moving forward. So we might just have to pull you in a bit more regularly and say, please come along, Sarah, to make it a three-way show. Because I think the more we talk about this in such a symbiotic way, the more that we talk about it in such a, with our synergies so aligned, I think it would make such a difference, hopefully, to the people watching.
Yeah, I'd love to. When I'm not working in school, I would love on my half-term breaks and things to hop on with you
Fab,
both.
fab. Well, thank you all ever so much for watching. Thank you again, Sarah. Wishing you all
Thank
a
you.
lovely weekend. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.